I have to podcast. There's nothing familiar left to me but the podcasting. God is change. I hate God. I have to podcast.
Welcome back, friends, to Science Fiction Book Club, a podcast for bookworms and stargazers. In every episode, we dive into the pages of our favorite science fiction novels to break down the big ideas, ask the nerdy questions, and maybe, just maybe, learn a bit about ourselves along the way. I'm Opsa, and as always, I'm joined by the indomitable Abu.
Always a pleasure to be here, Opsa, and always a pleasure to complete a book together, which is exactly what we're doing today.
That's right.
The back half of Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, chapters 14 to 25, is what we will be talking about today, folks. So please do the reading before you continue listening today.
And as always, we encourage you, join us, share your thoughts, email us at sci-fi-bookclubpod@loreparty.com, join the Patreon at patreon.com/sci-fi-bookclubpod. We post free reading guides, discussion questions, bonus clips, all the bloopers you can hope for on that Patreon. And it's also where you can find our Discord, where we like to keep the nerdy sci-fi discussions going with fellow readers just like you in our community.
That's right. And you can find all of those links in the show notes below after you're done listening. Now, folks, here's the game plan for today's episode. No different than any other book club episode that we do on this show. We will begin by summarizing the assigned chapters for today's reading. Then we'll share our impressions of the back half of this book. And finally, we will wrap up today's discussion by diving deep into a couple of takeaways in our sci-fi analysis. So, all of that and more coming up after a quick break. Hang tight, folks. When we come back, we're finishing this wonderful and extremely sad book.
rather disturbing book. All of that coming up next.
Does it ever feel like you're a marketing professional just speaking into the void? Well, with LinkedIn ads, you can know you're reaching the right decision makers. You can even target buyers by job title, industry, company, seniority, skills. Wait, did I say job title yet? Get started today and see how you can avoid the void and reach the right buyers with LinkedIn ads. We'll even give you a $100 credit on your next campaign. Get started at linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
All right, welcome back, friends. Let's begin, as always, with a brief summary, beginning with chapters 14 to 16. The summer of 2027 is the moment that Lauren's world falls apart as her worst predictions come true. The wall is torn down, and Robledo is attacked by pyros. The community and its people are devastated, and most of them are killed in, honestly, brutal ways.
Yeah, tough to read.
Really tough to read. Tough way to start out this block of chapters.
Yeah, for sure.
Lauren does manage to escape with her life, just barely, and manages to link up with Harry and Zara. All three are devastated by their losses. Harry's entire family is dead. Zara's baby was killed in front of her.
Oh,
and
God.
Zara tells Lauren that she saw Corey and her brothers killed. The three figure their odds of survival are better if they stick together, and so they decide to head north following Lauren's maps. Along the way, they gather supplies and what weaponry they can afford. However, after they're attacked in the night, Lauren is forced to reveal the truth of her hyper-empathy syndrome with her companions. and she reassures them that it won't be a hindrance to the group.
Yeah. You can imagine something like that would raise questions about their survival.
Yeah.
If you're going to pass out every time we get attacked and you have to shoot or stab somebody because you feel their pain when you do that, how long are we actually going to make it out here? But Lauren tells them that it's nothing to worry about. She'll be able to keep it under wraps. She'll be able to do what needs to be done if and when they are attacked, which, of course, we do see over the course of this book. She does exactly that.
Yes.
So in the next 3 chapters, 17, 18, 19, Harry begins to wonder what Lauren keeps writing in her journals, sitting in the corner every night, scribbling away. And this is where she begins to carefully, very delicately start sharing the most inoffensive parts of Earthseed with him.
Right.
And thus begins Lauren's journey as a prophet of a new belief system, a new religion, which I will have a lot to say about in my takeaway later. The group then meets a young family who is traveling with a young child and invites them to travel together. Lauren, I found this a little funny. Lauren finds herself the fifth wheel at this point because Harry and Zara have begun hooking up. And of course, there's the couple with their child. Lauren is the only one without a partner at this point. The child's father, whose name is Travis, also begins to show some interest in Earthseed.
Right.
And in fact engages Lauren in some debate on this philosophy, on this worldview that she has written down in her books. The child's mother, whose name is Natividad, is also intrigued. And here is where we truly get the sense that these are the first seeds, dare I say, of Earthseed. These folks will clearly become one of Lauren's first followers.
Yeah.
As she begins to slowly convert them to her philosophy. The crew then continues to grow because at this point they run across this trustworthy-looking old man named Benkole who joins up with them, and they end up saving the lives of 2 sisters, Allie and Jill, from a collapsed house after an earthquake.
That's right. And we, of course, come to learn what a really sad and unsurprisingly tragic background that Allie and Jill have. Which is really true of really everybody that the original trio encounters on this journey north.
Right. There's a lot of shared pain in this group. Nobody here is without their own story. That's a bond they all share. That they've all been through some of the worst that life has to offer.
And managed to survive.
Yes. Yeah, critically.
Moving on to our next 3 chapters, 20, 21, and 22. The earthquake has caused chaos along the coastal route, so the group decides to turn inland, where they rescue a small child whose mother is killed. Allie becomes the de facto caretaker for this 3-year-old and starts to take on this role in the group. Lauren and Benkole, meanwhile, become romantically involved, and which was interesting. I have some questions about this. But in any case, we learn he's been making his way north all the way from San Diego after his wife was killed and his community attacked, just like Robledo.
Right, there's that shared pain again.
Yeah. Benkole eventually reveals that he's headed to a 300-acre piece of land that he owns where his sister and husband and kids live. And he tells Lauren that he wants to marry her.
Whoa.
And eventually agrees to having the group settle there as well.
All right, let's wrap up our final 3 chapters here, 23, 24, and 25. After a nearby gunfight, the group ends up recruiting a woman named Emery and her daughter Tori, who came into their camp trying to look for shelter from the battle. And we learned that these 2, in fact, escaped corporate slavery after Emery's husband died. As they travel, Tori quickly makes friends with another young girl on the road named Doe. And so then we add 2 more. Doe joins up with the group along with her father, Grayson Mora. The group then is attacked by pyros And the Pyros actually managed to kidnap Tori. Lauren is injured in the fray, and Jill tragically is killed. They rescue Tori, but Jill takes a bullet to the back. It's revealed at this point that Emery, Tori, Doe, Grayson, the latest additions to this group, are all hyper empaths.
Right.
Just like Lauren. And that is why, in this particular fight, none of them were able to participate. Unlike Lauren, who is willing to fire her gun, feel the pain of someone else's death, and collapse. These four don't quite have the willpower to do that. So in this instance, they did nothing to help in the fighting. Now, the group carries on and actually manages to escape a massive firestorm that almost engulfs their path.
Yeah.
They're able to rush towards safety and ultimately, by the end of the book, make it to Bancole's property, to that 300-acre piece of land, that piece of safety that they've been looking for, only to find the charred bodies of Bancole's sister and husband and presumably their kids in the burned husk of what was once clearly their home.
Yeah.
Again, tragedy after tragedy after tragedy in this world. Here's how the book ends, though. And for what it's worth, I do think it ends on an uplifting note. After some debate, Lauren is able to convince the group that building their new community here on this piece of land owned by Bancole is their best option. They don't actually know what's waiting for them up north. We have an option here, and I think we should take it. And so they do. They named their new home Acorn. They hold a really beautiful commemoration ceremony for all the loved ones they've lost along the way, not just Bancole's family here, who they bury, but every single person that they've lost individually and collectively as a group on this journey. And that's where this book ends, Hopsa. That's chapter 25. That's the end of Parable of the Sower.
Yes.
What are your thoughts? What are your thoughts on the book? And in particular, this back half of it?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to sound like a broken record here. It is such a brutal, dark book. And
truly,
I agree. It does end on a slightly hopeful note. They've kind of reached this destination that they've been seeking for the entirety of this journey north. And though it's not exactly what they expected, at least it's a place from which they can begin to rebuild, to form a new home for themselves. And there is certainly some warranted optimism in that and something really uplifting. But I have to say, and I almost hesitate to say I love this book, though it's true. I absolutely do.
Yeah.
But I also almost feel traumatized by it, to be totally honest.
I agree.
Octavia Butler just doesn't pull any punches at all throughout this novel or offer any of the traditional sci-fi escape hatches I expect from the genre. And especially coming from some of the books we've recently read, this is just absolutely not cozy reading to call that out for all readers. And in case you thought that's what you were getting into, that is not what this book is.
Yeah. In fact, you can't even put this book on the same shelf as A Psalm for the Wild Build.
No.
It'll burst into flames.
That is absolutely true. This is an unflinching, eyes wide open depiction of what civilizational failure, looks like, what social collapse actually looks like. It's so full of pain and darkness that I honestly felt at times that I had to build some psychological defenses against it, which I can't be alone in. And really, as good as the writing is, I couldn't breeze through it. It had enough weight that it felt like I needed to sit with it a little bit and take my time with it. And in any case, all to say, I can tell I'm going to be thinking about this story for years to come. But Wow, what a gut punch.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. This was such a tough read in the best way possible to get through.
Truly. Yeah.
And I agree. This is going to be a book I will be thinking about maybe for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
This is certainly a book that on this show that I will be referencing a lot. I know we have this running joke that we constantly reference Three Body Problem. I'm going to add Parable to that list. I feel like this is a book I will be referencing in the future as we talk about other sci-fi because it is just so good. I loved it. In particular, I loved the second half of this book. And again, just like you, it's so difficult to say I loved it, right? Like, I only loved it insofar as much as you can love something that makes you feel so scared and sad and depressed about the potential state of the world, especially like we talked about in our first episode, especially because so much of it feels like it is happening already.
Yes.
And, I just want to say, like, chapter 14 in particular, like, floored me.
Yeah.
I read chapter 14 not wanting to believe what I was reading.
Yeah.
That's the chapter where the community is attacked, right? Lauren's literal world burns to the ground. It's so jarring and so shocking, even though, let's be honest, Lauren has been predicting this since day one.
We knew it was coming. Totally.
We knew this was coming. So the reader also fell into the same trap that many of these community members did, assuming that the status quo would just remain the status quo, hoping against hope that the worst wouldn't come to pass. And yet it does. So I really liked how truly shocking and well-written that chapter was. All of that being said, though, I do want to say, throughout this book, between all the gloom, I truly felt there were little moments of hope and humanity that really shined through.
Yeah.
And in fact, really shined a light on some of the really powerful, impactful, and beautiful themes of this story. Themes about community, themes about self-reliance and resilience. I think in Lauren's actions, in the group's actions, in the debates that they had, in the way they survived out there, like, we saw examples of humanity, and we saw examples of what humans can do when they're at their best, even in a world that is at its worst.
Right.
And that kept me hopeful throughout the whole book.
And to be honest, with every new member of the community or potential member, I felt myself suddenly becoming a little more uplifted. That like with this like growing band, that doesn't have total consensus on what they should do, what the world looks like, what the right choices are, but kind of provide this like diversity of background, identity, and for that to be, really the source of their strength, I found to be encouraging.
I did too. I completely agree. And here's the last thing I'll say, as far as my impressions go for the back half of this book.
Yeah.
I guess you could call this a criticism, but I actually think it's more of a compliment. I was left at the end of this book wanting more. And in particular, wanting to know more about the world. Like, what's going on in the other countries in this dystopian future.
That's right. It's only hinted at barely kind of throughout the book.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And the fact that the companies are like buying up U.S. land and and putting U.S. citizens into like basically indentured servitude.
Yeah.
It implies that is this like a U.S. collapse problem? Like, not the world economy is maybe okay? I have a lot of questions, right? Like, I have a lot of questions about the world. I have a lot of questions about like the what ifs. Like, would Lauren's group have been able to cross over into Canada? What's going on in Canada?
Right.
I have questions about Lauren's vision for the future, her ideal for humanity to go out into the stars. Is that even possible? Are other countries sending out space missions?
Right.
We know the U.S. is deprioritizing that. We got told that at the start of this book.
Right.
But does that mean space missions are impossible right now for humanity? Like, where's the tech at? I don't know. Again, the book is not concerned with these things. Yeah. This is just me asking questions by the end of the book and wanting to know more about the world building.
Yeah.
The book, of course, is like laser focused on Lauren's survival and her journey, Earthseed's journey, the beginning of this new religion, etc.
Right.
That has nothing to do with Canada. As much as I want to know about what's going on in Canada.
Yeah. For all we know, Canada is the reason the U.S. fell.
Yeah, for real. We don't know. And again, like, this is not a epic sci-fi book that's interested in like the geopolitical big picture ideas like that. This is a very focused, character-driven story from Lauren's perspective,
Totally.
which is its greatest strength. So I'm not asking this book to change in any way. I just am hungry for more world building, which I suppose means I should pick up the sequel probably and see what else I can pick up. Maybe they talk about Canada in the second book.
Yeah. Really obsessed with Canada these days, aren't you?
I'm just saying, how do you get a Canadian citizenship? How do you get out of the U.S. if you really need to?
Yeah. All questions we're asking ourselves at the moment.
They're on the mind. The questions
They're
are
on the mind. That's fair. No, I agree. I mean, the world building is really quite tightly scoped. And because the narrative structure is kind of this like, found archival journal diary sort of, framing, it is absolutely centered on Lauren's perspective, which I agree is actually one of its greatest strengths. Like, this is such a personal account that it feels visceral, and because of that kind of personal account, you have this like really vicarious experience of kind of dread and what the kind of the overwhelming fear of the direction society could take if we leave our problems unchecked, which is really quite powerful.
Yeah, definitely. What a great book. I'm so glad we finally tackled this one. This one has been on our list for a while now.
Definitely.
All right, then. Well, we still have a couple more thoughts to talk about. We both have some takeaways. We want to dig into some themes and ideas in this book. Before we do that, though, so let's take a quick break. Dear listener, catch your breath, get some water, maybe buy a rifle or something. But don't go anywhere, because we'll be right back to dive into our sci-fi analysis.
This episode is brought to you by Nespresso Virtual Coffee Machines. Ready to enjoy the bold flavors of barista-quality Nespresso iced coffee at home? Simply fill a glass with ice and press the brew button on your virtual pop machine to enjoy rich double espressos roasted to stand up even when chilled. Refreshingly bold iced coffee. Refreshingly easy to make at home. Visit Nespresso.com to shop now.
My cat Freddie loves to be brushed and cuddled. But stirring up his cat allergens meant sneezing and itchy eyes. Then I found Purina One Live Clear. It's cat food that reduced the major allergen and my suffering in as little as 21 days. Now, we feel closer than ever. If you have issues with cat allergens, you really need to try Purina One Live Clear.
Try new Purina One Live Clear today. Purina One, a difference from day one.
All right, welcome back, listeners. And as always, let's jump into our sci-fi analysis. Abu, why don't you take it away?
Sure thing. So here's what I wanted to get into in my takeaway today. I want to dig a little bit deeper into Lauren's leadership of this group and her eventual evolution into the prophet of Earthseed, which I think we obviously see happen over the course of these chapters, 14 to 25. I gushed a lot about Lawrence in the last episode. I just want to warn everyone I'm about to do that for like the next 10 minutes straight. I think Lauren is such a great character, and I truly think, in the most tragic way possible, Lauren's resourcefulness and her intelligence begin to really shine when her world falls apart. Because for the first time in this story, for the first time in her life, she is completely in charge of her own destiny in a way that she has never been before. Like, literally in charge of like her survival. The fact that she may or may not die like tomorrow is completely in her hands and based on her decisions. Yeah. And I think this really pushes her to stepping up and really leaning on her intelligence and her gut instincts and her wonderful interpersonal skills. I think all of the qualities that I love so much about Lauren begin to shine in the second half of this book. In particular, I will say, in her interactions with the group.
Right.
As the group gets bigger, as new folks fall into her orbit, Lauren is so good at handling them, right? She treats them at the start with just the correct amount of suspicion. Because you can't trust everyone out here.
Right.
But at the same time, there's just enough warmth, and when the time is right, she extends the olive branch and invites them into the group.
Yeah.
Because ultimately she knows community is what keeps people alive, especially in this world, especially outside these walls.
Mm-hmm.
I think what Lauren models for us is really worth noting here. I think she models a leadership style that personally I aspire to. I won't speak for anyone else, but I do think we can all learn a lesson or two in the way Lauren approaches leading this group of survivors. Her leadership style is really based on a few core principles. It's based in compassion, it's based in open dialogue, and it's based in having a clear vision. Those are the three things that she provides for this group, and it's why they trust her so much.
I agree.
I want to share a quote here, for example. This is her very practical, very clear sales pitch for Earthseed to Travis when he challenges her on it. Travis, of course, is the father of that young baby. Quote, Earthseed deals with ongoing reality, not with supernatural authority figures. Worship is no good without action. With action, it's only useful if it steadies you, focuses your efforts, eases your mind. End quote.
Preach, Lord, preach.
Literally preach, though, right? Like, so good.
Yeah.
Because Travis here is like, I'm not trying to worship anything. I don't care if it's a god or change or whatever you say. Like, I'm not about to like bend the knee and worship anything.
Right.
And Lauren is like, bro, I'm not asking you to.
Yeah.
I'm asking you to be realistic out here. We need to survive. That is what Earthseed is about. And I think, stepping back a little bit, I think what makes all of this that much more inspiring is we can't forget the fact that Lauren is a poor Black girl. In a world where being a poor Black girl puts her literally on perhaps the lowest rung of the social ladder. She has everything in this society working against her. In this story, she has to pretend to be a boy when they're first outside the walls, right? They have to deal with the potential of racist violence.
Yeah.
All of these things that work against her, and despite that, she is such an inspiring leader to this group. She doesn't have access to like traditional power structures or social support systems, right? She doesn't have privilege, as we would say in 2025. And despite all of these things, she creates influence and trust through, again, competence, care, compelling vision, open dialogue, this leadership style that is able to overcome all of those things that might hold her back. And I think, in fact, some of these hurdles that she has to overcome do turn out to be some of her greatest strengths. We talked in the last episode about how she's so young, right? She still has that teenager's perspective and a little bit of that teenager arrogance that we all did at that age.
And rebellion,
And certainly rebellion.
Yeah.
But I do think her young age makes her more open to change and less jaded than somebody like Bankole.
Yeah.
And it positions her to be this kind of leader that is perfectly suited to guide her community, this community that is now formed of survivors, through transformation rather than trying to preserve an existing order. That's why she just felt so uncomfortable inside the wall. All the adults were trying to preserve a world that no longer existed.
Right.
She, because of her age, recognizes we're transforming into something totally different.
Right.
And so I think her young age, something she does have to overcome, also is one of her greatest strengths. She's able to be the exact kind of leader that this group needs.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's a honestly really great perspective on Lauren, because so much of what we come to understand about her would disadvantage her, would make her more vulnerable. I mean, even her hyper empathy,
Yeah, oh my goodness.
All of these things are really stacked against her in a way that you would really expect that if you had the choice, there's this philosophical parable, I guess, is one way of describing it, called The Veil of Ignorance by John Rawls. And the basic idea is if you were kind of given the choice to choose an identity for yourself prior to knowing who you would be on the other side, or I should say, if you were given the choice to define like an ethical system prior to knowing who you would be when you appeared on Earth, the system that you would define would be the most kind of equitable one, because you wouldn't know who you'd be on the other side. And I would say if you did know, you certainly wouldn't choose to have the attributes that Lauren has. I mean, she basically has every card stacked against her in a way that makes her, not the casino's choice. It's not the gamble you would take.
Certainly not. Right. The cards are stacked against her. And I think that's what just makes it all the more inspiring, what she's able to do here with this group of survivors and how she is able to lead them. And in fact, you brought up her hyperempathy. I want to touch a little bit on this as well, because again, her hyperempathy is seen as a weakness by practically everybody around her, right? Her brother Keith was like, yo, you can't survive outside the walls because your hyperempathy will get you killed.
Yeah.
But here's my counter argument. I think her hyperempathy makes her a better leader of this group and a better prophet for Earthseed.
Right.
She's not authoritarian in any way in her leadership style. I think that comes from her worldview. That's based in her hyperempathy. This authority and respect that she's able to get from the group comes from this shared vulnerability rather than detachment. She's not a leader who's like above them, right? She is a leader among them.
Right.
And I wanted to share one of the quotes that really, really got me in this reading. And I think it's an example that perfectly exemplifies how she is so empathetic with this group. This is a moment where Lauren is talking to Jill. They're walking behind her sister Allie and the orphaned boy Justin, who they bring into the group. And Allie kind of becomes a mother figure for her. And they're talking about Allie and Justin here. Lauren says, quote, "They do seem to be adopting each other, though. And taking care of other people can be a good cure for nightmares like yours and maybe hers." And then Jill responds, quote, "You sound as though you know. I live in this world too," says Lauren. End quote. Wow.
Yeah, powerful
I live
stuff.
in this world too.
Yeah.
Empathizing with the two sisters. It's a really lovely example of how great a leader Lauren is. And to wrap up here, I want to take a minute to step out of the narrative, because I think it's also fascinating to consider the themes and ideas that are being explored through Lauren's leadership style and through her growth into a prophet for Earthseed. I think by setting her story in a dystopian future and by making a Black female character her lead, Octavia Butler is perhaps modeling for us a pure, distilled leadership style, right? One that is completely free from any like modern social scaffolding, any privileges or disadvantages that modern society might thrust upon you, what cards are in your favor, what cards are stacked against you. All of that is washed away because we're in a dystopian society where all that really matters is survival. And here we see what kind of leader is appropriate when there is no social ladder anymore.
Right.
The ladder is on fire. What kind of leader is the one we need? Lauren, I think, is the example of the type of leader we need.
Yeah. It's not a strong man, notably. It's not somebody that leads with force, or kind of indomitable will. It's somebody that leads with, as you pointed out, compassion and understanding and empathy.
Yes. And a young person who leads with compassion, understanding, and empathy, right? Bencola didn't just take charge of this group because he's the oldest one here.
No, in fact, he seemed to be ready to go off on his own and abandon this group. Yeah, he was pretty confident about marrying Lauren, and then the two of them just bouncing
running away off into the sunset,
Yeah, exactly.
So I really liked that as like a larger theme of the story here. I think we are seeing, in Butler's opinion, a model for an ideal leader,
right?
Somebody who's worth following. I also think that by making Lauren the creator of Earthseed, Octavia Butler is exploring one of my all-time favorite topics in sci-fi. I'll admit, I'm a sucker for this. Butler is exploring how spirituality, how religion evolves and squares itself with scientific understanding, especially as our scientific understanding evolves and grows. The more we understand about the universe around us, the less perhaps we need to rely on religion to fill in the gaps of our knowledge, right? So then what is the role of religion? How does religion evolve and reshape itself to fit the needs of people who now know so much more about their universe because science has advanced? I think Earthseed is perhaps one answer to that. Perhaps the answer is that in a world where science advances our understanding of the universe, a religion that promises an ever-changing world rather than a static one, a world in which adaptability, survival, questioning, growth is the norm versus here are the rules, not to pick one religion an example, but like, here are the 10 commandments that I've written in stone that you must follow and can never not follow. You know, that's oversimplifying it, of course. There's a lot of nuance there. But I just love when science fiction tackles the question of religion because I think it is just so fascinating. And I do think a sci-fi story that just glosses over religion fails to understand like how core religion is to the human existence.
Totally.
And how core spirituality belief system is to just being human. Science won't just ever make that go away. Religion will inevitably evolve and reshape itself around our scientific understanding of the world. And I think we see that with Earthseed. Earthseed is like religion 2.0. The religion that this world in particular needs, that Lauren needs on a personal level, that these survivors need on a community level, and that this world needs at large. And so I really liked this exploration of the religion versus science theme in this book as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Yeah, it is one of the kind of most perplexing things, and it's a question we continue to grapple with. You know, what role does it have in our lives when so many of our questions get answered? And yeah, I think it's quite a brilliant approach that Octavia Butler has gone with here to make God change, which is a universal constant. Change is, it is. It's fascinating.
It is. Okay, I want to end on a bit of a question for you, actually, Opsa. I hope you're ready for a pop quiz. Since we're on the topic of religion, I want to end on this. Bankole, at one point in this book, tells Lauren that Earthseed needs more mysticism to truly catch on as a religion, right? He says it's too simple, it's too practical. It needs a little bit of that X factor. And Lauren kind of shuts him down. Lauren is like, I can't be bothered to do that. That's up to the people that will come after me who follow Earthseed. Quote, I still think it's too simple, he said to me. A lot of it is logical, but it will never work without a sprinkling of mystical confusion. I'll leave that to my descendants, I said. End quote. That's how that exchange goes. And I want to call out, they talk about this twice. And in one of the other conversations they have about this, I think Bankole is actually able to surprise Lauren and catch her a bit off guard because he challenges her about the inevitability of change. Quote, I mean, it's too straightforward. If you get people to accept it, they'll make it more complicated, more open to interpretation, more mystical, and more comforting. With you or without you, they will. All religions change. After all, if God is change, surely Earthseed can change. And if it lasts, it will. End quote.
Bars.
Whoa.
Bars, Bankole.
Yeah. All right.
Oh, yeah.
And I do think, like, in Lauren's response, it's clear that she's a little bit caught off guard by this. And she concedes, right? She's like, yes, I agree. God is change, and Earthseed will also likely change beyond what I write in my journals here. But she also stubbornly kind of ends it by saying, well, as long as I'm around, I intend to shape Earthseed into, quote, what it should be.
Mm.
And, I left that not entirely satisfied with Lauren's response to Bancole's questioning there. And I'm curious where you fall. Do you think Bancole is right? Do you think Earthseed needs more mysticism? Do you think it's inevitable that it will become more mystical? Do you think Lauren is perhaps showing some of her youth and hopeful ignorance here in her response? I'm curious about your thoughts.
No, I mean, definitely good questions. This was such an interesting passage, and in general, I found Bancole to be an interesting foil for Lauren.
Agreed.
Because of course there's, well, one, a pretty huge gap in ages between the two of them. Which, to be fair, makes the romantic partnership they form a little. I couldn't quite understand that. As far as Octavia's choice there, but on the other hand, it's moments like this that you can see that Lauren can benefit from some age, some wisdom, the experience of seeing people over long periods of time evolve in ways, and what that means for a society, which, to be fair, Lauren really hasn't been able to experience at all. She was really quite sheltered, ultimately. As much as we admire her, we also have to remember she probably hasn't left a 5-mile radius from where she was born. Yeah, maybe a little bit, maybe 10 miles, but Bancole has obviously experienced much more of the world. So yeah, I mean, Lauren's, I think, youth and some of her naivete does come through, because to some extent she will have to be around in order to shape it in this kind of argument that she makes, and they don't know that the next day is guaranteed. So already it's kind of on shaky grounds. I guess, as far as Bancole's point here, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think he makes a good point. Like, you do have to leave room for some mystery, otherwise, or I should say, like, incorporate that a little bit, some mysticism, some mystery in kind of the foundations. Otherwise, people will read their own, and kind of invent their own, perhaps, harmful explanations for things, or at least, like, ones that leave them no better off than what the text of the religion offers. So I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know that I have like a totally settled take on it all, but definitely an interesting debate, here.
For sure. And I think it comes down to, like, interpretation. Yeah. Interpretation is such a touchy subject when it comes to religion, right?
Totally.
Like, there's a very bloody history on the interpretation of various different texts throughout religious history. And Bancole seems to be implying Earthseed will be no different, right? People will take your philosophy, with or without you, and run with it.
Right.
And reinterpret it through their worldview and their lens. And there's only so much you can do to control that. Even if you are still around, your followers who spread this religion won't spread it in exactly the perfect way that you envision. And I think that's something that Lauren will, as she grows and as this religion grows, will have to square with.
Right.
She'll have to come to terms with the fact that her religion will take on a life of its own without her.
Right.
It's an interesting question. I also don't know that I have a clear answer here. I like that Lauren has such a crystal clear vision of what Earthseed should be.
Yeah.
I'm willing to follow that vision.
Yeah.
But I also concede that Bancole's got a point.
Yeah.
And it's something worth considering.
Totally.
All right. Well, that's my long, winding takeaway on Lauren and her leadership style and the themes surrounding religion in this story that I love so much. I want to hand the mic to you next. What's your takeaway? What's a big idea you want to get into?
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, I think our ideas have dovetailed in interesting ways because obviously this tale is told from the perspective of Lauren Olamina, and I think I want to focus on something that helped me process the second half of this book and
Okay.
what I take away as kind of its note of encouragement, which is in many ways along the lines of what you said, what true strength and courage actually looks like in a world that, for all intents and purposes, is falling apart. And unsurprisingly, it's Lauren Olamina that helped me see this. And a lot of it is, as you kind of characterize it, in her leadership style. But where I kind of, I guess I see a different angle to it is it ends up being less focused on self-reliance and much more centered on communal connection and community ultimately.
Yeah.
And we, of course, see her mature, grow, form her own philosophy, and, of course, change over the course of the novel. So I think it ends up being kind of a rich topic to dig into. So let's do exactly that.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I think what's striking is that when everything collapses in chapter 14, what we expect of Lauren is that she becomes harder, more closed off, more self-reliant, more focused on individual survival. And she even starts out this section basically saying exactly that. Quote, "I am one of the street poor now, not as poor as some, but homeless, alone, full of books and ignorant of reality. Unless I meet someone from the neighborhood, there's no one I can afford to trust, no one to back me up."
Ooh. Yeah.
And as much as this is provoked by this harrowing experience that she's come out of, it's also kind of on brand. It's what we've generally seen from her. In the first half of this book, when she's readying herself to leave the neighborhood, she's not really planning on taking anyone with her. I mean,
Yeah.
it's pretty late that she even shares her plan with Curtis, her longtime
poor
boyfriend,
Curtis,
you know,
right.
who she's known her entire life. And she really never details her intentions to anyone else, let alone convince them to join her. You know, when she tries to encourage Joanne to prepare for what's coming, her best friend, and that, of course, falls apart, it doesn't exactly work out, she basically gives up on convincing others completely. It's really a lot of foreshadowing, but it's as if she always expected to be hitting the road on her own. But by the second half of this book, Lauren's tune changes, and it happens really, I would say, after chapter 14, after she's escaped this trauma of her neighborhood collapsing. But she eventually learns that real strength isn't about becoming more self-sufficient, but by letting others into the walls she's built around herself.
Wow,
she's not totally tearing them away. I think like that. The truth of it is, she still has her guard up.
Yes.
You know, she's still a survivalist. You know, she's still aware of what the stakes are here and that there is real danger around them. But maybe others can join her in the safety and the kind of growing philosophy that she's building. And so I think the first moment we start to see this is the moment when Lauren first encounters Zara and Harry after the massacre. Lauren, of course, learns that her family has been murdered from Zara, who says, quote, "Everyone's dead. Everyone. Those painted bastards killed them all." Which is so painful, of course, but instead of hardening herself and refusing the vulnerability of connection with Harry and Zara, who of course are, you know, new entry points into pain for her. I mean, if anything were to happen to them, then again, she is suffering the pain of loss. But what does Lauren do? She makes the difficult choice for her, which is to trust them. And I think in part she's also reciprocating the trust that she gets from Harry here. Quote, "He was offering trust. He meant we could trust each other. That was no small thing."
Yeah.
This
that's
is
huge.
this is huge. And I think this is really Butler's first argument about strength, that choosing to trust is the most radical act possible when suspicion and isolation and self-protection feel safer.
Yeah. Ooh, wow.
And of course, Butler continues to push Lauren in this direction towards even more vulnerable choices, even when it brings her, say, physical pain. Allie's sister, of course, over the course of these chapters, dies, and she kind of blames Lauren, at least for surviving, if nothing else. But Lauren comforts her rather than fleeing that moment. She moves in the direction of the pain. Quote, "She was hurting herself doing that. She was rubbing her face too hard, too fast, rubbing it raw. She was hurting me too. And I didn't need any more pain. I stayed with her, though, until her defenses began to crumble under a new wave of crippling grief. She stopped hurting herself and just let the tears run down her face, let them fall to her chest or to the broken blacktop." And that's what we see. We see Lauren here hugging Allie. She takes on her pain, and she transforms that moment into one of healing.
So beautiful.
Yeah, and to your point, it is why she is such an effective leader. You know, she isn't chastising Allie or reminding her that they need to survive at all costs and keep on, and keep moving forward. She takes the time to stop and to sit with Allie, even though Allie, again, kind of blamed her. She was giving her the cold shoulder, pushing her away. But Lauren's an effective leader. She's a really strong kind of figure, and clearly what so many of the group needs in this time of turmoil and tumult.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, this pattern keeps repeating itself. I would never call this book repetitive in any sense, but there's clearly a theme here that every time that Lauren could choose self-protection, whether it's keeping out a potential new member of the community, she instead chooses connection to draw them closer, to grow her community. And with Benkole, she also sees someone worth loving, worth building a future with, even if he doesn't share her beliefs. Even if he angers her. There's an interesting exchange between the two of them. Quote, "Going to fix the world, are you?" he said with quiet amusement. I looked at him. For a moment, I was too angry to let myself speak.
Ooh.
When I could control my voice, I said, "It's all right if you don't believe, but don't laugh. Do you know what it means to have something to believe in? Don't laugh." After a while, he said, "All right." And this moment I found to be really quite, I don't know. I mean, you can see that at the end of the day, Lauren is still a sensitive young woman, and she has this burgeoning belief system that she has collected, so many new people to follow, but she also has some uncertainty. She certainly has high conviction and knows the importance and value of this belief system that she's developing, but I think there is some I guess defensiveness that's revealed in her angry reaction to Benkole here. She didn't laugh it off or kind of wave it away. She felt anger because she cared, and she cares about him, and clearly feels this connection. And that happens with, of course, many others along this journey north. Harry and Zara, of course, early on find love in a hopeless place, so to speak.
Truly. And I think speaking to that, though, speaking to this idea of community, you could criticize Harry and Zara, for example, for being reckless.
Yeah,
right. Even totally. Zara is we're not using protection. If I have a baby, I have a baby.
Right.
And you might be like, what are you doing? What is with this callous attitude? Yeah. But I think something that's hard to square as people who don't live in a dystopia, you could argue that, I suppose, but you and I don't live in the same dystopia that these characters do.
Certainly not.
And I think something that's hard to square is just how desperate you would be for a connection in this reality. if everything else in your world was falling apart and you had the chance to just cuddle up with somebody next to the fire, wouldn't you? That, I think, is a tough thing for folks who live comfortable lives to understand. And that human connection, this theme that you're getting at, this idea that like community, Lauren is learning that letting people in, the community is the way to be self-reliant. Letting your walls down is an okay thing to do. And in fact, the only thing to do to remain human and to survive.
Right.
Harry and Zara instinctually kind of know that from the get-go and seek it out right away.
Totally.
And as you're saying, like we see this pattern of Lauren continuing to choose the group, continuing to choose connection over her own self-preservation, even when it physically, literally physically causes her pain.
Totally.
She chooses the community first.
Totally. Yeah. I mean, that's, I think, one of Butler's lessons for us here as well, that, it's this incredible argument that love isn't a luxury that you can postpone until you've secured survival.
Yeah.
Love is survival, and it is so deep. I mean, it's
putting that on my hinge.
Yeah, just photos from your bunker, and love is survival.
That'll get him.
That'll get him. Yeah. And I mean, in any case, I that's just, what I have just kind of loved about this this novel, and this, especially this second half, for as many moments of really kind of gruesome and horrific, pain that you encounter, there is this kind of recurring theme of love, of connection, of the strength of community. And
Absolutely.
It's, of course, their final destination in the plot of land that they get to when they reach their destination north. They form this new community, which they christen Acorn. Yep. And I think it really crystallizes everything Butler seems to believe about the source of true strength. They find, of course, that it's been razed to the ground, that the land has been destroyed. Right. Quote, there was no house, there were no buildings, there was almost nothing. And they could have kept on moving, but Lauren saw possibility there. Lauren says, quote, we can build a shelter, put in a winter garden from the seed I've been carrying. And what's notable is, of course, that she is saying that we can do this, that we can survive, that together we can form a new community. We can plant our seeds here. And the strength is in this act of creation. It's not in the destruction that they've seen elsewhere, in the roving bands of hooligans is the, I don't know, the completely the wrong way to put it, but it's not
those
in
ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah, I mean, they're domestic terrorists. I mean, ultimately, like they're surrounded by these, kind of overt displays of violence as strength and destruction as strength, and instead here it's creation as strength. It's the willingness to plant their seeds without guarantee of an outcome on the other end, but to have the courage to do so regardless.
Right. And this makes me think of a quote from earlier in the book. Lauren's father says something along the lines of, survival is the only thing that matters. Tomorrow doesn't matter if we don't survive today.
Right.
And I think what you're getting at here, so makes me consider that destruction isn't the answer, but survival also isn't enough.
Exactly.
This is almost a rejection of that idea as well.
Totally.
Creation is the source of true strength.
Totally.
You have to move past the destruction and even past the survival into creating something new, into leaning into the change, into founding Acorn, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a big thematic idea here about the rejection of like survival at all costs, actually.
Yes, totally. I agree. I totally agree there. I mean, this is really, just another instance of change. This is Lauren's evolution of a philosophy that is outdated. It's simply not enough to just survive. It's essential for humans, I think, to form connection, to experience love, and to participate in the act of creation. This is really one of the most powerful, I think, lessons here. And I'll kind of wrap with what ends up being also kind of a powerful moment here, which is the communal burial ceremony they have at the end.
I loved it.
After everything that they've experienced, Lauren insists on them taking the time to grieve properly, to plant oak trees for their dead, to process as a community. And again, this isn't a celebration of destruction or of death, but it's a remembrance of their loved ones and those that they cherished. And the planting of the oak trees is, again, another symbol of creation, of the fact that, as I think I'm trying to remember this Earthseed verse from the first half of the seed, but essentially that the phoenix rises from its ashes. And similarly, this community acorn is very much rising from the ashes of what was previously there and the destruction that took place before they arrived.
Absolutely.
I'll conclude here that, Butler's vision of strength here is kind of almost the opposite of what otherwise seemed necessary for pure survival in the harsh and brutal landscape that she depicts in this book, particularly in the first half, but also, of course, in the second. It's not about being invulnerable or wholly self-sufficient or having the best weapons or the tallest walls. A true strength seems to flow from connection to our fellow humans and the bonds of community. And that parable quote at the end, that actual parable of the sower, suggests that even if the ground isn't fertile yet for that message, it's vital to have the courage to keep planting anyway.
Amazing. Snaps. Snaps.
I mean,
preach,
Octavia, Lauren. I mean, they are our prophets here.
Truly.
Well, just shining a light in moments of darkness.
Yeah. Wow. What a great takeaway, Opsa. I couldn't agree more. I think the theme of community and how crucial and important it is to not just society, but to every single person on a human level, on a personal level, is deeply ingrained in this story. Totally. And I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is what Octavia Butler was getting at. This is the message Octavia Butler is trying to get across in this story.
Yeah. Great
takeaway. I loved it. All right, though. It's about that time. I hope so. In fact, it is that time. We got to give this book a final rating.
Indeed, we do.
So I'm curious, where does this book fall for you? What would you rate it?
Yes. For once, I don't have an absurd scale to use here. I think for me, this one gets undoubtedly, particularly for how kind of deeply I've kind of felt it. And I have to give it 5 acorns out of 5. It's simply a spectacular, if harrowing, and honestly, as I said before, somewhat traumatic book to read. But I think that's why I just feel so strongly about it. I honestly am walking away with my own conscience being racked. I feel like I have to examine the choices I'm making. I'm wondering if I'm going to be the one that helps bring the demise of the country.
Oh my goodness! Right.
So many questions this book makes one ask of themselves.
Absolutely.
And yourself. I mean, what do you I feel like I might be able to guess. We might be all able to guess here.
If you were a betting man, I think you'd win this one. Yeah. I have not been shy about this being a 5 Earthseed verses out of 5 Earthseed verses book for me.
No doubt. Yeah.
I love this book so much. It has been such a treat to read it, and also the most horrifying thing I've done all year.
Yeah.
And I think I said this in the first episode, but I really, really do think in the year 2025, this is required reading.
I agree.
If you have not read Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler, you're not only missing out on one of the best sci-fi books ever written, but I think you're missing out on one of the most prescient books that is so relevant to what's happening right now in the world around us, packed full of ideas that are so important for all of us to keep in mind.
Totally.
And I, for one, feel changed by this book. And really, like,
Yeah.
a 5-star rating for me is a book that not only I loved, but a book that changes me.
Totally.
Whether it's in a small way, maybe it's a small reminder, like in A Song for the Wild Built, to take it slow and to remember to love myself, right? Like maybe it's just something comforting. Or in big ways, like in this book, the big reminders about community, love, trust, self-reliance, growth, change. This book changed me in big ways. And for that reason, it gets a solid 5 from me and a very strong recommendation.
Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't have put it better myself.
All right, so well, that wraps up our journey with Parable of the Sower by Octavia Butler. Next up, we're going to be reading another great book. Honestly, we're starting this season 3 off with some bangers.
Oh, yeah.
Folks, here's your homework for the next episode of this podcast. Make sure that you have picked up a copy of Ted Chiang's short story collection titled Exhalation. And for the next episode, make sure that you've read the first short story in that book. That short story is titled The Merchant and the Alchemist's Gate.
That's right.
That's what we will be talking about in the next episode. And of course, if you're wondering, hey, what's the schedule? When do I have to have that read by? What books are you reading this season? Check out that link in the show notes below, folks. You can find our entire season's schedule with all of the books we're reading, with all of the chapter due dates in that document below. So that's a great way to keep up with us and join the conversations over in Discord. So check that out in the show notes.
Definitely excited to be kicking off that book together.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Well, friends, we're not sure any of this is going to fix the world, but you can help us try by leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And be sure to check out the other shows on the Lore Party Podcast Network on loreparty.com. You can also follow us on Twitter and Instagram at lore_party. Thank you so much for listening, and remember, this podcast isn't good or evil, doesn't favor you or hate you. And yet this podcast is better partnered than fought.
Don't fight us on that.